on, I'm going live now.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, I'm live now, so thank you very much for joining us. I'm here with Snake Was Right.
Hello.
Hello. And who's probably wrong, but that's okay. I'm joking.
Impossible.
Impossible. So we're here to basically talk over... Fabio's joining us as well. There we go. Hello, Fabio.
Hello.
Okay, yeah, so basically what we're going to be talking about, or hopefully talking about, is a version of a moral system which is claimed to be objective and is based upon imposition of the will, which some people may recognize as being something TJump has been saying. And, I had a conversation with TJump a long time ago now, and I thought I understood. I wasn't questioning his views at all, but I was trying to understand his position. And I think I did manage to understand his position, which was, as far as I can recall, anything that imposes upon the will, or somebody's will, or against their will, is deemed to be immoral. And that's an objective standard because there's no necessary ought that is derived. It's just a statement of fact about what actually happened. Snake, do you think that's correct or not correct? Do you think I'm accurately giving the flavor of TJump's argument?
Yeah, and he would kind of add that, like, he hypothesizes that there will be more information to come, like that some alien race would be able to find, like, a fact of the universe that makes that correct or something as well.
Yeah, I would put that slightly differently in that he would say that this system has a prediction, which is that eventually in time all things will be included in this moral system.
Yeah.
And presumably anything with a will then has been imposed upon, and that includes aliens, like you're saying, would also be then included in this moral system. And the reason he comes to this conclusion, I should also add, is based upon moral progress. And I guess that's deemed to be intuitional in some sense, but moral progress meaning that more and more things have been included in this category as time has gone on. So 2,000 years ago, women were thought as property and therefore outside of this particular system, and therefore not having a will which could be imposed upon, even though they had a will. So when he says will, I take it to mean not necessarily anything that actually has a will right now, but is included as being, but is included in this system, that when it's imposed upon, we would deem it to be an immoral act. Right? When. And notice that's past tense. Am I still okay with you, Snake?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so now it occurred to me then that, on its own grounds, this probably can't be disputed because we're not talking about deriving an is from an ought, which is the normal way a moral system is shown to have some inequities, or at least shown to have some double standards. So if we're going to show a double standard in some sort of contradiction, I think we're going to have to be a little more on the ball. And so my argument goes roughly this way, right? Which is, and again, having spoken to Tom about this, and he seemed to agree at the time, although this was, months and, maybe a year and a half ago or whatever, I don't know. He seemed to imply that if, for instance, a truck coming down the road was to run somebody over, that would be an immoral act. Okay, because the truck itself would be imposing upon the person's will crossing the road.
Yeah.
Now, this seemed to me to be fair enough, and he would say, and I'd say something like, well, a truck is an inanimate object. It can't be moral or not. But of course, what he's then framing it as being it's the person crossing the road, okay, that is determining whether the act is immoral, not the object itself. Okay, so that could be a rock, in other words. It could be anything. Could be anything. So this led me to a conclusion that if that's the case, then it could be that, and I'm going to set up a hypothetical to show what I believe to be a contradiction. So this hypothetical is that there's a rock which is involved in a landslide. Okay? And in this landslide, there are many rocks. Okay? And this one rock, as it's falling, there are two people on the mountain. All right? One halfway up and one at the bottom. Okay? And as this rock falls, it hits another rock. Okay? Which if it had not have hit that rock, it would have hit a person, okay, and killed them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but this same rock, upon hitting the second rock and removing the imposition of will, or removing the path of the second rock to kill the person, which we would then call a moral act, this same rock then gets also deflected, and it gets deflected onto the second person on the hill and kills them. Is that clear?
Yeah.
And that kills them and imposes upon their will. So the same rock, okay, this is the point, the same rock is both moral and immoral. It's immoral in the second case because it kills the person that it lands on, but it's moral in the first case because it interacts with another rock which would then have killed that person. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Or a second person. So that seems to me that you're calling one rock moral or immoral. Okay? And I think there is a way out of that, which is, again, to focus then on the person whose will is being, imposed upon.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's to say, well, no, it's immoral in the first case, but it's moral in the first case, but it's immoral in the second case. Okay? And if that's the answer, then I would say that then focuses the attention on whether it is an objective system. Because it's not objective in that case, because it depends upon the person's will, right? That's being imposed upon. Okay? So it can't be objective and use the word in that particular case. It can't be objective and use the standard of somebody's will.
Yeah. No,
okay.
I agree with that.
Those are the two kind of prongs of it, of what I'm calling the dilemma, really, to show that this imposition of will, either if you treat it as objective, has a contradiction in it, if you call the rock moral or immoral, right? Or the action of the rock moral or immoral, because the same action leads to a contradiction, i.e. the rock falling.
I don't know if you need that part, though.
Well, maybe you don't, but I'm just saying that in order that part highlights the fact that you are relying upon the imposition of will as being the key factor.
Yeah, and
if you do that, then it becomes subjective by definition. So that's basically the argument.
Yeah, makes sense.
Oh shit! So that's the end of the conversation, is it? TJump's wrong.
Okay. That's kind of one of the flaws I think TJump's argument has. Like, I think imposition of will is kind of in the right direction, but it's not complete, and it's kind of wishy-washy. Like, it depends. Like, if that's the case, and then rocks are being immoral, that doesn't really fit the definition of morality, because the way I understand immorality would have to have moral agents, and a rock is not an agent. But if it depends on the will of the subject, then that's subjective.
Right.
And it just doesn't go far enough. Like, I would say violation of individual rights is kind of analogous to imposition of will. But I think you have to go deeper than that. It's like, why? Who cares if I violate your individual rights, or why would we even conceive of rights in the first place? It's like,
Yeah.
what's the point of that?
Yeah.
So you have to go deeper.
Yeah. What standard do rights are rights derived from?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, agreed. I think what I'm showing though is a problem with saying. I think I think what I'm showing is that with these two kind of sides of the argument, I'm showing that there's a problem with saying or calling something a moral system, for which a future behavior pattern is not dictated. Whether you follow it or not is another matter, right? But this is what I'm saying. If morals are not about oughts in terms of behavior, right, then we're not talking about morals, because we're going to have these contradictions which are just insurmountable. I.e., we're going to find inanimate objects called moral or immoral, which in itself is not a problem, but it leads to this contradiction of they're unable to have a will, and so they're unable to change their, they're deterministic in that sense.
Yeah.
Right? And if they're deterministic, then we're going to be able to show this contradiction between calling them moral and immoral at the same time.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the will to change their behavior pattern, right?
I agree. I would conceive of an ought maybe a little bit differently than you, but
okay, that's interesting. Before we get to, I'd like to talk about that next, if you wouldn't mind, but I'd just like to ask Fabio what you think.
I mean, I listened to that. I mean, first of all, I understand, the position. I don't like it, because it seems to me that deciding what's immoral or not, I mean, the burden is totally on the person eventually receiving the action. So that is something which I personally don't like. It's also, I don't think it's super informative, because, I mean, let's take, for example, the same action, okay, killing somebody. It might be immoral to kill somebody, and it might be not immoral to kill somebody else, like a terminal patient or stuff like that. So again, it's weird, and I mean, I understand there is a difference between the two positions, but a simpler thing might be somebody can change his mind, so the same action becomes immoral or not immoral depending, if he changes his mind on that particular. So I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that you have to ask every time you got to ask to the other person, okay, is this infringing on your will? Because I have no idea what your will is. And it's kind of what I would say scapegoat, but it just gets away from me all my whatever I might think what's immoral or not. The other thing, it's about the example that you made, and I think, Simos, but you correct me if I'm wrong. So basically, you said there is an event which causes another event, which saves one person, right? But because of that event, the first cause kills another person. So it's the first event, and I think that at a certain point you said, so that the original event is moral and immoral at the same time.
Yeah, the rock falling is how I phrased it. So that I'm treating the original rock as being in both moral and immoral.
So I understand the objection, but I think that an easy, well, no, not easy rebuttal, but a point of contention might be that, and again, it might be either me that I haven't got the point or I'm super picky, I have no idea. But it seems to me that the original point doesn't even try to define what's moral. And that's the other thing which I don't like about it. It just gives you a criteria to define things which are immoral. Now, it remains to be but okay.
Yes,
now
I see what you're saying there. Yeah, the imposition of will. You mean that
right.
phrase only tells you what's immoral.
Yes. Now, it remains to be seen, and I would say from the get-go that I have no idea, but I strongly disagree because I think there is something fishy there. It remains to be seen that is everything that is not immoral moral. And I don't think that's the case, because there might be something which is like either not immoral or more, just
amoral is the phrase, right?
Yeah, how do you say neuter? No, neutral.
Amoral?
Yeah,
Neutral.
sorry.
Yeah, amoral. Yeah,
Yeah.
without
So-
moral status.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know about your example, because I think somebody might point out that thing, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Any other points?
No.
Quickly while we're
no.
okay. Yeah, I mean that's absolutely the case that I hadn't addressed for sure, and I'm not sure what TJump's response would be to that. I mean, I guess his definition of moral being an imposition of will. If it's not imposing on someone's will, then everything which doesn't impose on somebody's will is either amoral, right, or moral. I suppose it must be moral by definition.
Yeah. Right.
Although it doesn't exclude amoral acts, right?
Yeah, but I will contend that it's and again, I don't know. I'm just thinking about these things for the first time. But is it a good? I mean, is it a good criteria to move into the world just avoiding things that are immoral? That would be my thing. I would say that we should try to do things that are moral, not only avoid things which are immoral.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's something which he pushes back against strongly. Which because he doesn't include anything that you should do. There are no shoulds in his moral system. Right, which I know is difficult to understand from somebody. Yeah, right, from somebody who thinks the purpose of morals is to tell you what you should and shouldn't do, or at least give some judgment on that. Not whether you should or shouldn't do it, maybe, but whether one ought to do it or not. That's different from whether one should do it or not.
Well, I mean, in that case, if that's his position, I just give up. I mean, good luck to him. It's, I mean, it's gonna be fun to see going against millennia of. I mean, I'm not talking only philosophy, right? I'm talking about a lot of our disciplines. So I would just raise my hand and say, okay, I'll just grab the popcorns and wait. What the fuck happens now?
Sure. Well, this is why I wanted to come up with some some type of rebuttal to the system, right? Because the system is not unknown in philosophy. To base moral system on dispositions is not unknown. It just, I just don't think you're going to be able to get away with it in terms of, it's this. Okay, I don't think you're going to be able to get away with it in saying, well, it's just about a disposition of whether somebody wishes something to happen or not. I don't think that's going to be good enough as standard. For the reason that you pointed out, for instance, which is really you're not saying what is moral, you're just saying what is immoral.
Yeah.
And even then, that's no standard, then, is it? Because you're basing it upon something which is subjective.
Oh yeah, no,
i.e.
that's the other. So
somebody's will.
this part is fascinating to me because I think that the part which is fascinating is that you can actually say that the criteria is objective. I mean, by definitionally, the criteria is objective, but it's not objective if you try to put it in place, because it varies from person to person. Who is the object of your actions? Every time is different because everybody has some kind of different will, depending on the action you do. Unless we're talking about something, I mean, like definitive and like, okay, I want to cut your arm. Yeah, okay, well, maybe the majority of people will tell you, no, my will is that I want to keep my arm. Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
But I don't think you need a moral system to get to that point.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that. Snake, did you want to say something on what's been said?
Are you familiar with the universally preferable behavior? Stefan Molyneux.
Stefan Molyneux, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah, very much so.
Again, I think it's kind of on the right track, but it misses that ultimate standpoint as like, okay, so who cares about your preferences? But there is a type of system that you can get where it's kind of like what you were talking about before, is like a consensus of what everyone prefers. Is everyone would prefer not to be a slave. So it's kind of got that veil of ignorance kind of quality to it.
Yeah, I think that's what
I just don't think it goes far enough.
And if we're going to use the veil of ignorance as a criterion, then of course there's no problem with saying that morals are about oughts, right? Which is the main point that TJump wants to get away from in order to declare an objective standard. You seem to agree, Fabio, that was an objective standard. In what sense do you mean that?
Well, it's objective because you can say that thing about every person. I mean, if you define something which is immoral, something that goes against your will, I mean, that is standard, right? But I mean, the actions will not be standard because, first of all, I've got to ask to you, Simos, okay, what is your will about this thing that I'm going to do? And you might be answer yes or no. And then I got to ask you the same thing to Snake, because, maybe Snake has different, will about that thing, Maybe Snake doesn't like tomatoes, and I'm going to destroy all the tomato supply in the world. And I ask to you, Simos, no, I like tomatoes. My will is that I want to keep eating tomatoes. Okay. And then I ask Snake, well, actually, I'm allergic to tomato. If I eat one, I die. So, I mean, burn them with fire. Okay, yeah. So it is objective because the question is the same. But that doesn't imply that the answer will be the same.
You're right. Okay.
I do hate tomatoes, by the way.
So say what?
I do hate tomatoes.
Oh, me too. It makes two of us, and I'm Italian, so yeah.
What?
I don't eat raw tomatoes.
We have a consensus here.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, raw tomatoes are bad. I mean, if you cook them, I'm fine. So yeah, swings and roundabouts. See, I mean, that's another point that you got to ask me, because okay. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. So let's just talk about the objective nature of this then, because my argument was that, and I don't think, and I think we need to just rephrase what's going on here, right? Because you're saying that I'm the rock. You're saying any action can't be called immoral, so it can't be a moral system even if it is objective, right? I mean, you can't win both of those arguments. In other words, I'm saying, look, if I say to you, action X, right, is immoral, that can never be said, in the system which we're
No,
advocating
no,
for here,
I
right?
don't think so. I don't think so. No.
Okay, so it makes it relative.
Yeah, I mean, so another example would be that, the top of morality is having a kilogram of stones. Okay, that would be the top of 1 kilogram of stones. Now, if you go on the moon, that is not a kilogram, so that would not apply. If I go, on a higher density planet, that again would not be a kilogram, so that would not apply.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm struggling again because what I'm doing is bashing my head against this idea of not having an ought, right, Snake? So I need your help here. Okay. I
Yeah, I
keep
mean,
coming back to it and saying, well, what is it about morals, right? If you don't have an ought, right? And in my example, I was saying, well, look, the same rock, the rock itself, the movement of the rock itself is both moral and immoral. Okay, so that therefore that's not a moral system, is it?
well, I think you can have actions that have both moral and immoral consequences. Like self-defense is killing, which is bad, but it's defending your life, which is good. I think that outweighs the bad. But yeah,
Right. So
but I
in
think
this
you need an ought.
example, there's 2 people dying, so there's no way to judge whether.
That's just an act of nature, and yeah, I think you can call an act of nature bad or good, but I don't think you can call it immoral or moral.
Right, but
Because I
it
think
is a
you do need an ought.
consequence. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah,
I think it's a consequence of TJump's system, though, that inanimate objects are going to cause more, or the actions are going to be judged moral, immoral.
Yeah, I think you could separate good and bad from moral and immoral and kind of solve it that way. But it doesn't seem like he does that.
No. I mean, again, I think we've all agreed, actually, that the system itself is as good as far as it goes, but it doesn't tell you anything. So can we just try to identify why it doesn't tell us anything?
Well, it doesn't tell you what you ought to do and what you not.
Yeah, but that's
You ought not
we in order to do an internal critique, we've got to take that out of the picture, right? Because his moral system is not about oughts.
Well, I mean, the part about not having ought, to me, it's I mean, it's really it's great if you think about it, right? Because it just solves all the problems of that definition. And again, I think the discussion should be on the fact that you doing nothing. So to me, it doesn't seem to me that is a standard for morality. It's just a standard for what's immoral. But I don't think that's enough, if you get what I mean. I'm struggling with the concept that you doing nothing. It might be not immoral, but it's not moral,
Right, but then let's try reversing it then. So
Right.
if a rock hits you and you wanted the rock to hit you, that would be moral under this system.
No, that would be not immoral. The system doesn't prescribe anything which is moral. And again, if I understood...
No, there are no prescriptions. There are only descriptions.
Right.
Right. So the rock having hit you when you wanted the rock to hit you, that's described as moral, because that's in accordance with your will.
Yeah, but okay, so that is the part that I don't know, and I asked at the beginning, and I think I got to ask to Snake because I think he's more familiar with that position. Because again, my understanding, and I might be wrong, is that what's implied in the definition is only what is immoral. So the rock hitting me when I want the rock to hit me, that definition doesn't tell me anything. At best, it's going to tell me that it's not immoral, but it doesn't tell me anything which is moral. Unless, again, we want to say that everything which is not immoral is moral, which, yeah, I mean, I would love to see an argument about that.
Yeah, I just think it's if you redefine morality as protecting the will and immorality as violation of the will, then it's fine. But I just think it's not the standard usage of the word.
Right.
Of course, that's given. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even TJump says this isn't the standard or consensus use of the word. This is a minority position.
And you could, like, there could be a word. We probably do need a word for just the noun, which is imposition of the will. I just don't think morality is good for that. Although, I suppose if you could show that there is no such thing as moral facts, that would be the closest word, the closest thing morality could come to.
Well, there are certainly arguments for that, aren't there? As Godless Girl likes to ram down everybody's throat.
Yeah.
Did you have a debate with Godless Girl? You did, didn't you? Snake?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're supposed to have a second one.
Yeah.
Which I'll be much better prepared for.
Although that didn't focus on the anti-realism of morals, did it?
Yeah. I don't think I did poorly, but I didn't really have a game plan.
Yeah.
I didn't have like a strategy, which...
Well, the problem is that, you know, when you're defending a position like moral realism, it's going to come down to a definition. That's the problem with it, isn't it? So I think when you defend anti-realism, you have the advantage of having at least the default position of saying, you know, like she says no moral facts exist. And that's because that she relies on the is-all problem.
Yeah.
To say that.
And I think I can get around that with using standard definitions.
Yeah, okay. I'm dubious as to whether that's possible or not. Like you know, like I was saying, if morals are not about a mind in some way, I just don't know what morals mean.
Well, I think right the problem lies in
either way, whether it's descriptive or prescriptive, right? I don't know what it means. And if morals are about a mind, then I think objectivity goes out the window because there's no standard which is going to be universal.
I think
in the sense of objectivity, the way at least Christians think about it, anyway.
The problem seems to be in that no one ever wants to define what an ought is, and people just all kind of accept that this word is out there, and no one really knows what it means. But so that's what I was thinking of, and that's where I made my breakthrough to where I am now. Which I think an ought is a statement that something is correct. Whether you're right or wrong about that claim, I think that is a claim. If you're saying you ought to do something, you're saying that's the correct thing to do. You're saying you ought not do it, you're saying it's the incorrect thing to do.
Yeah, notice you're using the phrase to do that, though.
Yeah.
Right, so you're talking about future action.
Yeah.
So you're talking about prescriptions.
Yeah.
And so that's the definition of ought.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think there can be facts about the prescriptions of whether the prescription is correct about it being a good thing to do.
Yeah. Okay. I keep banging my head against this wall of saying, well, we're going to talk about minds then, aren't we? We're talking about whether a behavior pattern of a mind should do X or Y.
Yeah, I think a mind is necessary for morality.
Right.
But I think that
So
there are facts independent of those minds that will dictate what good and bad are.
I can't see how that happens. I can't see how that happens, not without referring to the individual mind. And as soon as we do that, we're back to subjectivity again.
Um,
Because
yeah,
it
so
depends upon the individual mind, Right? And there is no action which we can say is independent of mind. Even when we talk about, taking one's life or ending one's life, that
so like
still depends on the mind.
so
Although,
when I talk
sorry,
about
go
good,
ahead.
it's all I mean is it can do something. So a clock is good at telling time. A gun is good at firing bullets.
Yep.
And so if an action is good, what it's doing is allowing more things to happen, essentially.
Right, but when you talk about a mind doing something in that sense,
Yeah.
then you're talking about intentions.
I don't think intentions really matter that much. I think that
Okay.
not to
We
what I'm
managed
talking
to
about.
stir Fabio.
They matter in some sense, but not in what I'm talking about.
Well, I think they do matter in the sense that you're talking about, because they're not inanimate objects. Inanimate objects don't have intentions, agreeably. And
Well,
so when you
people,
talk about functions that way, that's fine, but you can't talk about minds that way.
yeah, you have to intend to do something in order to
Yeah.
do it. But that
Right.
doesn't change the nature of the consequence.
Um,
And you could have a system that has noble intentions, and it could be a good system because in general it works out, but sometimes there's a mistake. Like sometimes you could put an innocent person on death row, but the intention of the system is to get guilty people, but it's the structure of the system leading to mostly getting guilty people that makes it a good or bad system in the end. But of course, people
right.
have to intend for it to exist to even think about it in the first place.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. And I guess we're at the same point where we were with TJump's theory, right? Which is to say, look, yeah, when you talk about a system, right, then that presumably is objective because it's applied to everybody, all right? But that's not necessarily. It's still going to be relative. Fabio, please jump in.
No, it's the intentions part which is not objective. I mean, you can set up a system with good intentions. I agree with you. Let's talk about what is a good intention. So we'll have to come to an agreement what a good intention is, and eventually, I don't know how it can be reached. Maybe by the majority of people or stuff like that. But again, it's not something that you can start from the get-go. It's not the system which is the problem. It's the intentions part. I mean, you made the example of putting people on death row, right? I mean, and I understand that in China, it's a system with good intentions because they want to kill criminals. Everybody. I mean, in most of the other parts of the world, that is not a system with good intentions because the good intentions are to rehab the criminal. So again, it's kind of like with the definition of that we talked about. It's an objective thing that you can say. Anything that imposes against somebody's will is immoral. Cool. Yeah, we can say that. Right. Setting up a system with good intentions. Right. And then we get to the nitty-gritty part of it. And again, it's objective, meaning that you can say that, everybody can say that, and we can all get to an agreement that eventually will define what good intentions are, or what the will of the person are. But still, you got to ask the person, ask the community, ask whatever is there.
Yeah, I mean, I would go as far as to even say Hitler probably had good intentions.
Oh,
He
fuck
thought,
yeah.
He thought he was saving, humanity in general, society, flourishing of
Society, society, and he did.
functioning
Right.
civilizations.
You got to remember they came from a depression in Germany,
Yeah.
which was crippling.
Oh, there is a very good example
globally.
about that, historically about that, which happened during the Nazi Germany. Well, there was a program called Action T4, and basically was a system, again, where they asked the families to send their either retarded kids or kids with disabilities and stuff like that, to send them in state hospitals where they're going to be taken care of and all blah 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 blah. And what actually happened was that they killed them. The intentions were that the state was going, a disabled kid or stuff like that was going to cost a lot to the state, in taking care of money, which could be used to be given, to, for example, young couples. And those were actually the examples that were made. Those were the rationale behind. So, if you look at Germany, the state as a complex system, that is, that was something with good intentions, because the majority of the people belonging to Germany would get a benefit.
Yeah, I don't think the end of killing the disabled was just to kill the disabled. Just
No, it was absolutely to kill the disabled.
Well, the end goal wasn't to kill the disabled. They were killing the disabled to get another benefit.
Yeah, to save money.
To benefit
so the
society.
state was saving money. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But they weren't just doing it just for fun, right?
Well, no. Okay. I mean, so the historical example gets a little bit more complicated than that. No, they were not doing it for fun. But the thing is that, for example, they would never.
But
Yeah. Well, yeah.
No,
I mean,
there was also a eugenics motive as well, right?
It's a very dark piece of history. I mean, it's really, it bumps me out just to think about it. But the thing is that in that example, for example, they couldn't sell that idea to the population. So the way that they sold that idea was telling to the families, give us our kids so the state will take care of them. And the families, and actually they didn't need the police to go house to house to get the kids, because the families were bringing the kids to those hospitals. They were carrying them physically. Mm-hmm. Because it was good for them, because it's less of a burden for me. I don't have to take care of the kids. It's going to cost me money, resources. The state is going to look after it. Cool. So, but they had to sell it that way because they couldn't sell it with the real motive. So again,
yeah,
intentions, yeah,
more complex anyway.
Yeah, I mean the intention of dropping the nuclear bomb was to save lives.
Yeah,
but probably it depends on which calculus you buy. But you could have potentially saved lives net, but probably killed more than it saved.
Well, I slightly disagree that it was to save lives. It was to save American lives.
Yeah.
So I don't think they would, even in the calculation that they made at the time, they wouldn't have calculated how many Japanese were going to die. That wasn't part of the calculation. It was just how much is it going to cost? How many American lives is it going to cost to invade Japan itself when we've already lost, hundreds and hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, but
to
and again, I think we come full circle about, so it's not so much to try to find, at least, this is what I think, and I'm probably super wrong. It's not so much as finding uh, a good recipe, for either to find something immoral or something moral, but it's trying to find a good criteria, and meaning that going to the specifics of the thing. And this is the part where I think that finding something objective, it's close to impossible. I would say it's impossible. I mean, I haven't thought too much about it, but my gut feeling would be that it's going to be. I mean, we can try to find some. So there was, for example, I remember a conversation I had probably 10 years ago with somebody else on the internet, and we tried to find, and we talked about a criteria like sustainability. Sustainability was, to me, I think it was the closest objective criteria, and it's not objective, okay? But it was the closest objective criteria that, at least at the time, we could think of, in order to, to define actions as being moral and immoral. And again, it's a very wide blanket, so I don't know how much is going to help everybody in everyday's life. For a lot of decisions, a lot of things that you do, or, I mean, you can't really evaluate with that criteria. But so that was the closest we found, and it's very generic. So
yeah.
Well, what
Again,
I mean, what
Go ahead, Snake. Sorry.
like what criteria could satisfy? I know it's a hard question to answer, but a lot of people are looking for like a moral molecule, well, at least the critics,
right.
or something like that. I don't.
Well, I think
'Cause
there is
I
such a
think-
thing. I mean, that's right.
Like-
There's such a things as what do they call I can't remember, but there is such a thing as the attachment chemicals, right? And that's the closest thing we're going to get to some sort of moral,
Sure.
objective moral system, as far as I'm concerned. All right, so I can't. Are they called endorphins or something like that? Maybe. Yeah, and that's going to be the closest thing, because that's how families or mothers and fathers and children are physically forced to bond, right? And that's the thing which we've then, as a human race, extend across many different areas.
but
and I think that's. Go ahead.
No, I mean that's the thing, is what gives you, I would say, satisfaction or makes you feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And again, is it really objective? Because
Yeah.
now you have the psychopath or the sociopath, and you automatically have to exclude them, so it's not objective anymore. So I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, well, we can. I mean, this. Okay, yeah, no, that's a good point.
Or a
But,
group of people who bond over murder.
yeah. I mean, yeah, psychopath. I mean,
Yeah, psychopaths. I mean, it's the closest thing that I can think of to your system, Snake, and TJump system. In fact, right? Because it's an evolutional explanation, and therefore it applies not just to human beings, but in fact any mammal which has this chemical system. Right.
Well, it explains why we have these intuitions toward morality, but I think there are laws of life in the universe that show certain actions just are not sustainable, right? You can't have a population that's constantly trying to murder each other, like on as the norm. But so these behaviors emerge because there is kind of a truth to how they work. But I think that the ultimate criterion would just be existence, as simple as that sounds. That would be the foundation of what good is.
Right, but and then we're dealing with the same issue, right? Some people don't want to exist, right? And some people, it's not right for them to exist, right? We all expect if somebody is
But
in extreme pain and has no hope of any reprieve, then we'd all agree that maybe euthanasia is a moral thing to have at that point, and to help them die is probably the right thing to do.
yeah, but like
Right?
in a case where someone is destructive and someone who should be removed from existence, it's because they're harming the rest of existence.
Mm.
And
Right. Well,
it's
that's interesting, because I don't think that should be the case. All right. I mean, they should be removed from the circle, for which they can involve it, but they shouldn't be removed from existence.
well, sure. I mean, if you could banish them to a different realm entirely,
Yeah,
I guess that would be better.
That's what prison is, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so
And
yes.
person is certainly more moral than just executing every thief and
Right.
someone who gets into a bar fight.
Yeah. No, you were just talking about sustainability there as well, right? And yeah, sorry, I'm just reading this comment here.
No, because Snake, say the word sustainability, so I didn't want to. I just want to be precise. When I was having this conversation, the criteria we just came up with was environment sustainability. So
Yeah,
that was. It wasn't like
Yeah.
society sustainability. So yeah.
That reminds me of the idea that was going around in the late 70s of Gaia being the ultimate standard for morality. And by Gaia, what always meant was the global ecosystem, if you like, isn't it?
Yeah, which is funny because the global ecosystem, at the end of it, doesn't give two fucks about it.
Yeah, it's one of the issues we're saying.
Yeah,
that should be the standard.
right.
Well, we're back to nature again. Oh, okay, so it's right for the lion to kill the gazelle, right?
I mean, if you want to push it,
Yeah.
and you take Gaia as the golden standard you want to reach, best thing that people could do was to kill
Everybody,
all of them. Yeah, so humans are the single most
destructive.
destructive cause of the planet. And again, we can destroy the planet and we can kill ourselves. The planet wouldn't give two fucks. It would keep carrying on. So
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's interesting, because I think that highlights back again to this idea that when we're talking about morality, in fact, we're not even talking about animals. We are literally talking about human beings.
Oh yeah.
Right. And that's the only thing we know. Right. And when we talk about human beings, we're always talking about intent. Yeah. Right. There is no right functioning human. In other words, Snake.
No right functioning human?
No. That's an impossibility.
As in they're always right?
No, there is no right functioning human being. There is no human being which functions in the right way. Right, because that's prescribing a standard, right, for human behavior, which just can't happen. I mean, it's an impossibility. Think of it over the long term and the way evolution dictates. Right, there's no goal for evolution. And if there's no goal for evolution, then there's no goal for humanity.
Yeah, right? I don't think you need a goal to have a standard for good.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so what does it mean? What does a standard mean if it's not a goal? When you're talking about intent,
it's just the thing by which others are measured.
Right. I can't see how we could possibly have. Yeah, I don't see how we could have a standard by which we humans are measured if human nature itself is evolving.
Well, it's just, do humans cause various things to cease exist. And does it matter? Like if humans wiped out the environment, all of life, including themselves, the Earth would. It's just an objective fact. The Earth would have less stuff going on its surface.
Right. Is that a bad thing, though? I mean, like we were just talking,
Well, yeah.
if Gaia is the standard, by Gaia we mean the Earth,
Yeah.
right? And everything on the Earth, it doesn't give a fuck. I mean, it's not a conscious thing, right?
Well, it doesn't have to, because it's just a measurement of how much function is happening on the Earth. The Earth either has bustling societies and a bunch of life on it, or it has less, or it has none.
Mm-hmm.
And good is just a description of how much stuff is good for.
Yeah, right. Well, that's obviously tautological. I mean, you know, it's not going to be a standard by that sense, and you are trying to bake in to that phrase a standard by which you're going to include humanity and what you perceive as good for humanity, right? Like we're saying, if we take Gaia as the standard, then it's probably best that all humans just commit suicide, because humans are the most destructive thing on the planet. And if we're going to say biological diversity is what we're aiming for, then getting rid of humans is a good way to increase biological diversity.
We have to consider all of it. So, like, is it better to have like 5 billion different cockroach species or 5 billion human lives?
Right. So diversity can't be the criteria then, because the answer is 5 billion different species of cockroaches.
Well, there's the amount of diversity is a lot lower.
Yeah, exactly.
With between cockroach species.
Well, no,
it's not really
that's not true.
So
that's
5 billion cockroach species is not really expanding the amount of function and goodness on the planet.
Again, you're using the word goodness
but a billion
to
human
describe
lives
what goodness is.
What?
You're using the word goodness to describe what the word goodness is.
Well, at some point you have to do that with words.
Okay, so
goodness
that's a problem.
Is the amount of function.
I guess that's what we're saying is the problem here, by saying there is something which is objective here. No, if you have to use the word good to describe what good is, right, then that's non-informative.
What's the amount of function, I would say. But
right, but
like,
okay,
if you're saying there's 10 inches or there's 12 inches in this ruler, well, what is an inch? An inch is just an inch. It's,
right. Yeah, it's an arbitrary scale, right, which has been agreed upon by the consensus of humanity, or at least those that use it, right?
But it's still objective.
It's not objective in the sense that an inch is an inch without people saying this is what an inch is. Right? So it's a consensus objective, exactly the same kind of consensus that Sam Harris means when he talks about reduction of harm, etc.
So, but in what sense would anything be objective then? If
correct.
So you're just an anti-objectivist.
Well, no, I'm saying that when it comes to oughts, okay, in order to get an ought from an is, we have to use some standard, and that has to be an agreed standard if we want it to be meaningful in the sense of some kind of objectiveness. All right, but that's arbitrary still. That's not objective in the sense that it's mind independent. It's completely mind dependent.
But to me, that's more of a linguistic thing. It's like we have to come to a consensus on what syllables mean what. But that doesn't mean that the things we're talking about are not objective. It's just we've assigned these sounds to that concept.
Yeah, I think we're being a lot deeper than that. We're not just saying these are just sounds. We're saying that the concepts themselves are cannot be physically objective. They are always going to be concepts. Why? Because they're generated behavior for a mind. They're not generated behavior for an animal, right? Or a rock, right?
So, like saying the sun objectively exists, and I say, well, the sun is that big fiery star.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, what's a star? And it's like that thing, that the sun.
Yeah, sure. That's fine. That's fine. Notice we're not talking about a mind, though. We're not talking about intentions. Can you give me an example which we're talking about a standard, which is to do with the mind, which is objective? Because I don't think you can. I think that's a contradiction in terms.
Yeah, well, I don't talk about intentions or preferences.
Agreed. Well, you talk about intentions. That's part of when you say a function for a mind. Right? That's an intention. That's another word for intention.
Yeah, but the intention exists. I'm not saying the intention, anything about it other than it exists.
Okay.
Or that,
and that's fine.
But what it can do or achieve.
Sure. But then we're not saying anything about its behavior, are we? If we're just saying, well, it has an intention. Well, yeah. I mean, of course, minds have intentions.
Yeah.
And that's if you're saying that at that level it's subjective, yeah. But then you're not saying anything about morals. You're just saying that morals exist. Okay, well, that might be objective, right?
Yeah. So, like, I guess it's semantic. If you could say morality doesn't exist, but good and bad exist because morality would be the intentions of beings trying to achieve good and bad. But if what I just said is true, then you still have those facts that underpin the intentions for good and bad, which is what good and bad is. It doesn't matter that the mind is, doing subjective mind things. There are still facts that govern whether that mind is achieving good or bad, or whether they're understanding what good or bad even is.
Yeah. No, you're right. But it's the same thing. I mean, so we went from intentions to good and bad, but it's still the same problem.
But I would describe that as a moral fact where, yes, the intention is subjective, but there's still facts driving that intention.
According to...
Yeah, but that's... So there are facts driving that intention. Well, there is a mind which is driving that intention.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I just need to point out, I think, then at this point, that we're back to a non-ought definition of morality, right? In Snake's view, is that right, Snake?
No, I have oughts.
Yeah, you might be able to derive oughts, but what you're saying is moral is not what we ought to do, is it?
What I understand is what an ought is something. If you ought do something, that action is good or correct.
Right. Okay. I think...
and so you can intend to do that, and it can also just independently be factual that it is achieving these criteria of what good is.
Yeah, that's... Every time you say it's good, I'm thinking, oh yeah, but that's the standard. And we need to define what that standard is. And then we're back round to the beginning again of saying, well, if you're going to have a standard, right, then why shy away from saying the standard is what we ought to do?
Well, I see them as separate issues. So whether or not good actually has some objective standard or not is a different issue from whether given if good has an objective standard, whether or not facts, your intentions can be aligned with those facts.
Yeah, granted, I've no problem saying that if we define what good is, right, then we are going to be in alignment with that or out of alignment with that, and we can describe that as good or bad. I mean, we can describe that as moral or immoral, I mean,
Yeah.
right?
So I don't see
But
the existence of a
that's
mind.
not the issue that we're getting at, right? That isn't the problem with it.
Okay.
The problem with it is saying, well, yeah, sure, you can describe morality that way, and you can derive oughts from it. That's no problem at all. But notice, all you're doing is substituting the word good for a prescribed standard.
Pretty much. Yeah, I think so.
Right. And if we're doing that, then we're saying what is moral is what is prescribed.
By the facts.
Yeah. Well, by what you're calling good.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And that, if we're saying it's prescribed, right, then we're saying, well, that's an ought. Again.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So we're not talking about an objective ought here. We're talking about a prescribed ought. Prescribed by whom?
But why would it be unobjective just because it's prescribed?
Because that's intentional. Once again. And if you're saying like it's the Sam Harris thing, you keep honing in on the Sam Harris thing, right? And I agree, right? This is my personal moral beliefs that I tend to agree. I agree with, right? Is that when we've decided a standard, okay, if that standard is a consensus, then it becomes in some sense independent of any particular mind. Right, and that gives it some authenticity for objectivity. Right, now, is that objective in every sense of the word objective? No, it's not. It's only objective in this special sense of the way I'm using the word. Right, so I'm redefining objective as opposed to in order to say that my moral system is objective, and I'm quite happy to admit that I'm doing that. All right. I'm not saying that it's objective in the sense that it is mind independent.
It's objective in the same way that a meter is a meter.
Exactly.
But we define the meter. So
yeah, even if that meter, right, which we know is defined by a particular distance in the world, an objective distance. Right. The problem is that objective distance is not objective in the sense that it's independent of mind. Right? Somebody had to measure that distance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so in my conception
had
of good is even more objective than a meter.
Please
explain. There's no arbitrary chunk of it.
And what is that?
Yeah. Well, could you just explain how exactly?
Because we're not taking an arbitrary chunk out of it and just saying, well, this is a unit of good. I mean, I guess
aren't you?
Theoretically could, but
well, isn't that exactly what you're saying? You're saying I'm defining what good is, right?
I think you could do that, but I haven't gotten that far yet. We're just saying what good is.
Well, you're not saying what good is.
You
That's the very point I'm making. You're just saying that if we call something good, then we have these consequences for morality. And I'm saying, yeah, that's fine. But why bother saying, why bother taking the oughts out then? Because you can do exactly the same thing with the oughts in and saying, well, we ought to act according to this standard. And you're saying, well, I'm just not defining the standard. Therefore, it's objective.
Well, I've defined good as just the amount of function.
Yeah, but function, as we've been through, is a state of intentions, right? What is the function for a human?
Anything a human can do.
Right, so there is no standard.
The standard is what's real.
Well, some humans can do some things, some humans can't do the same things, right?
That's why.
So is the standard running the 100 meters in under 10 seconds?
It doesn't look at a human as categorically human. It could look at a computer, like a sentient computer, as having similar, if not the same, type of mental function as a human.
But I mean, hold on a second. So you're saying that the more I do, the better it is? The more good it is?
Essentially.
Really?
So not if like what you're doing is destroying cities and stuff, because that's reducing what the city can do and what other people can do. So that would be like contradictory.
It would be contradictory. Why?
Because if you're saying that good is the more function,
Yeah.
then if you have a part of that system that's reducing other functions, then that's the opposite of good. That's reducing functions.
So so again, the more I do, the better it is. That's what you're telling me.
Or the more you can do, yeah.
The more I can do, the better it is.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I mean,
a multi-tool is a better tool than a tool that can only do one thing.
Oh wow.
Well, I mean,
In that
I
simplistic
can
sense.
I can jump from a skyscraper. I mean, that would be good, right? Because I mean, I can do that,
Sure.
and I'm actually doing that.
If you survive, yeah.
Well, regardless if I survive or not.
Well, no, I mean, it is about survival, because if you jump off the skyscraper and die,
Yeah,
Right.
but you see, I mean,
you've ended all potential things you could
right,
have
but
done.
but now you're adding up things, so it's not only functions.
Now
It has
you're
to be
limiting the number of
functions.
things.
Yeah, so it's not only functions; it's functions that do not impede on others, and I don't see why, because function is a function. But yeah, I mean,
Well, 'cause
and also it's
I'm
a
not-
function that has not to be destructive for me.
Because
right?
I'm not looking at it as just you. I'm looking at the entire universe.
You're looking at but that's the issue. I mean, if you look at the entire universe, you're gonna be finding yourself in some kind of predicaments with that kind of stuff. I mean, I have cancer. I mean, I'm terminally ill, and I know that I'm gonna suffer a lot in the next months. I'm jumping out of a building, and I do that to spare myself, suffer. So, is it good? Is it bad?
I think that the ending your life because of quality of life is the hardest question for me to answer. But I think that it's answered in that pain reduces, at some level, pain will reduce function. Because all you're doing is just sitting there in pain, and that's not worth anything.
So it's continuing optimizing function, in other words.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're putting pain onto other people, which reduces their function. They don't want to see you suffer.
So I can go outside and kill the cats I find.
Yeah, I mean,
All the stray cats. I'm just gonna kill all of them.
No.
Why not?
But
I'm not limiting anybody's function by killing stray cats.
You're limiting the cats.
Okay, so now we got to take into consideration cats.
Of course, yeah, you have to
consider
everything.
We're building a weird structure here, and
Okay.
that is the problem. No, but that's the thing, I mean, you got to build structure.
I agree.
I think the standard is. I mean, we've gone from saying that good is the standard, and by good you mean function, okay? But that's particularly vague in sense of, everybody's or different functions, like, and the function of a lion, the good function of a lion, right, is to kill wildebeest, okay? So it seems a direct conflict, right? So we're not talking about cats. We're not talking about other animals, right? We're only talking about humans here.
Yeah,
right?
but
because we need to have this. Because we need to have this intentionality, right? The intention of a lion is to kill wildebeest, otherwise it suffers.
So that's why I make a distinction between good and bad and moral and immoral. So morality would be...
That's fine. But sorry, Snake.
Moral agents choosing good or bad. So that would require intention.
The standard was good, though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The good. And by good, you mean correct function.
Not necessarily even correct function.
Right.
If by correct you mean it exists.
No, I don't. By correct, I mean the function, which it's
Sure, like the
purposed
function of a
for.
gun.
I mean, I'm
is
using
to
your
shoot bullets.
I'm using your terminology, right? And so when you say function, right, I'm saying that that's an intentionality, which therefore makes it subjective and a standard. In which case, if we're going to say we need this standard, right, then there's no reason not to include oughts. Okay, because we can do exactly the same thing, determine a standard, right? People will call it subjective. Of course, some people will call it subjective, and that's fine, right? Just the same way I describe TJump's system as subjective. Okay, but notice that.
Well, yeah. So I think ought is interchangeable with saying something is good. So you could leave it out because they're interchangeable.
Right, and that's the issue I'm getting to, because if we say good is interchangeable, right, then a lion is good to kill a wildebeest.
Yeah.
Right.
And a nuke is good at blowing up cities.
Okay, but that then contradicts, right? The wildebeest example contradicts what you're saying is good for humans, right? Because what's good for the wildebeest is to kill. What's good for the lion is to kill the wildebeest in order to eat it. That's not good for the wildebeest.
But what's good for
and it's not good for me, because I mean, I wanted to go outside and kill everybody, and you told me I can't. So
yeah, that's fine. Yeah, prison is bad for Ted Bundy, but Ted Bundy in prison is good for all of society.
Right. So how are we reconciling this, other than saying there's an arbitrary standard by which we're going to judge these things?
Well, the standard, I guess, maybe this answers your question. The standard would be the good of the universe, or the good of the whole system?
No, we can't say that, though, can we? Because like with the Gaia example, right, the good of the planet, okay? Well, the good of the planet is to destroy all humans, because that's going to allow for more diversity.
But why would you take the humans out of that system? They're part of the system.
Well, because they're destroying the planet.
Yeah, but you have to consider the planet and everything on the planet.
Yeah, and if we do that, it's better to take the humans out, because they're the ones destroying the planet.
We actually, why? Then it's just a dead rock.
We are actually.
Whoa! No, it's not a dead rock. It wasn't a dead rock 300,000 years ago before Homo sapiens arrived, was it?
Oh, okay. Just the humans, not all life.
No, not all life, just humans.
But humans.
So that's the problem.
That's the problem. Life.
So you can't say it's the universe, just like you can't say Gaia is the standard.
No, that doesn't make any sense. I think you can make a balance between killing all humans and saving nature.
No. But humans are just going to do the same thing time and time again, right? They're going to overpopulate the planet, right? They're going to use their evil technologies, and the fact that they are trying to distance themselves from evolution and what do they call it? The law of nature, red in tooth and claw. Right? We're trying to distance ourselves from the vagaries of evolution, right? Because it doesn't have purpose, right? So naturally, we want to ensure our future, right, as animals.
So the most moral thing to do would be to find a balance between sustainability of nature and sustainability of humans, because we're part of that whole system.
Yeah, or sustainability of nature, like Fabio suggested, was the closest thing we could get to an objective standard.
But that's derived from my Hooper values.
Such a stupid idea. I see.
No, it's a great idea, but because baked into the word sustainability, right, is this longevity thing, I should say. And so therefore that seems more reasonable, but that means killing some humans, doesn't it? That means
Well,
keeping the population in check. That means reducing the good that humans can derive from the planet.
I mean, the thing is that
Well-
in order to reach a better sustainability of the environment, you would have to do exactly what Snake said we can't do. I mean, meaning that we should have less functions. So we should consume less. We should recycle more. We should reuse things more. We shouldn't throw away a keyboard just because the letter, whatever, it doesn't work properly. So we should have less functions, and that would be bad, but it's good at the same time. So
It's good for sustainability. Yeah.
It's kind of a conundrum there.
We should travel less,
But,
for instance.
I mean, the way
Yeah,
I see it,
Shouldn't have holidays abroad and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, you should take a
But
bike
if-
instead of buying 3 cars in a family of 4 people. You buy one and you just optimize.
So I don't see it that way. That if you're counting a new iPhone every year as a new function over like a rainforest existing, that I would say that the rainforest has far more function than new iPhones every year.
Agreed.
Oh yeah, no. Okay, but we said before that we cannot take that into consideration, right? Because I wanted
What?
to go outside killing cats, and you told me no because of the cats. So fuck the cats, fuck the forest, right? If it's my functions, I've got to do all I can do.
If you
And that includes
arbitrarily
buying a telephone every 2 days.
Yeah, if you arbitrarily set the system as just yourself or just your household, then whatever is best for you is best for you.
Yeah,
But
right.
That could be bad for the rest of society. It could be bad for the rest of the planet.
Right. So
Okay, but we know it's what's good for the planet, don't we?
If you
And
artificially take humans out of the planet, then
No, voluntarily take them out. Every human commits suicide on the same day.
that would still reduce the function of the planet.
No,
but
that
you
would
see,
increase
Snake-
the function of the planet.
yeah.
How it would have human? It wouldn't have humans
Because there wouldn't be humans destroying the planet anymore.
but humans also add to the planet.
How do humans add to the planet? We are away from evolution, right? We've
So?
evolved to the point where we can ignore the planet.
But we're part of the planet.
Yeah, okay, we're part of the planet only because we decide to be part of the planet. We could completely change the planet if we wanted to, right? The reason we don't change the planet is we recognize that in some sense doing that would hugely restrict our future behavior.
I mean, if we could go off and mine asteroids and let
Yeah.
more natural life exist on Earth, that would be better. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But then that's an arbitrary decision, isn't it? To say, oh right, well we shouldn't plunder the resources of Earth anymore because clearly there's a problem, right? So if we could plunder the resources of an asteroid, that would be better.
But how's that arbitrary? Because I'm considering everything.
Okay, I don't think you are considering everything because, like we were
I'm
saying,
trying.
well, no, you're saying that the function of everything is more important. Well, who's defining what the function of everything is? That seems an arbitrary decision in of itself. Who's to say that getting rid of the Earth wouldn't be better for the solar system? Who's to say? There's all of it's every time we're going to come across the same problem, right? There's an arbitrary decision over what the standard of good is, right? And by good we mean correct function, right? Why?
I'd
Because
say
humans have an
coexisting
intentionality, so we're going to have to somehow define with our intention what that standard is. And I don't see any way around that problem.
Well, the definition I'm using describes every moral intuition we have today.
Well, okay, but that's not hugely impressive, I'm afraid, if we go down the moral intuition route.
Yeah, it just aligns with it, but
Right, so there's going to be a
I mean, obviously
demarcation point.
There's gray
where
areas.
beyond which it's no longer morally intuitive to do something, right?
Well, I would say what it
Otherwise, we're going to
doesn't
get to
do is
that point.
recommend that
Sorry,
all
Snake.
humans die.
Let me just say. Otherwise, we're going to get to the point where we get to the Gaia example. We're saying, well, humans are just killing the planet. That's what humans do. They kill the planet.
Uh-huh.
Right. So it's best that humans don't exist in order to save the planet.
Or we modify our behavior to save both.
Sure. But then we're talking about an arbitrary decision about what is the right action to save the planet. At what point do we say we can take this much but no more? That's going to be an arbitrary decision.
It's going to be our best approximation. But
yeah.
It doesn't have to be arbitrary.
Well, when I say arbitrary, I just mean an intentional decision.
Okay. I mean, you can work out a way for there to be, X amount of rainforests existing alongside major urban centers.
Right, but you have to come to an agreement with that. And we're back to square one.
But isn't that what governments are doing today?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, they're doing that in a very subject. Yeah, but everybody's doing whatever the fuck they think it's good for them. And then eventually to apply to that. Because, you make the good example. So let me see if I can, make it, write it down really dumb for me. So the function thing about human, the single person, it doesn't work because you got to limit the functions, right? So you got to look for the functions of the old system. And in order to determine what are the proper functions of the old system, well, first of all, I don't see any way out that you have to limit the functions of human beings, in consumption and all that stuff. So in a way, in order to achieve good, you got to do bad because you got to limit the functions to increase the other function. And that again, is something which is, it might be problematic. And there is also the fact that everybody has come to an agreement on what is the best way to work the system out, to apply those functions. Because what is good, for example, for Europe, it's not good for India, or for the US. I mean, the laws that we have against pollution and stuff like that on cars, India doesn't even want to think about it because they say, yeah, hold on a fucking second. I mean, you fucked up the planet, and now you've reached a good standard of living, and now you want us not to reach your standard of living because you fucked up the planet. No, we're gonna keep burning coal and all that shit. So you have to come to an agreement per se, and that is, again, you can get to a standard the same way that we define the meter as a standard. And I agree with you. I mean, if we get to that point, I agree with you. It would be objective because we define that as objective. But it takes a lot of compromises by everybody.
So what's good for India might not be good for someone else.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's like there's a mixture of good and bad things happening. So I don't think that that's a problem for describing whether it's good or bad. But
every time you say that, Snake, you're implying that their standard has already been agreed. And that's
you don't have to agree to it.
Right, okay. So who's saying it's good or bad then? if they're not agreeing to it and you say it's bad, right? And they say, no, it's good. Who's correct?
Well, every person on Earth could be completely ignorant of what good and bad are. It still wouldn't change what the concept is.
No, again, I think you're saying, everybody could disagree about how long a meter is. It doesn't change what a meter is because it's already been defined. And you're saying you're trying to say the same thing, except you're not defining what the meter is.
Yeah.
Well, I think that I'm defining it. It's just you're trying to find contradictions in the definition.
I'm not sure what your definition is then. When you say good function, right? I'm saying, well, how can that be objective? Because it's dependent upon intent, right? And you say, well, no, it's good independent of intent.
Uh-huh.
But that is part of the definition of a function when it comes to a human. So I don't see how this is working in that sense. If you're saying that there is some external function for which humans are subject to, okay, then I'm not sure what that standard is, because, like I'm saying, you can't then refer to the universe, right? Because we've already got past the point where we're dependent upon like the whims of nature.
Well, good and bad isn't dependent upon intentions. I would say maybe moral choices are.
Right.
Choices
so
are
moral choices
intention.
are dependent upon intentions.
Yeah.
Right.
But good and bad is what makes a moral choice. The facts of good and bad is
right.
What would define between moral and immoral, even though choices are intentional states.
Choices are intentional states. Right. Okay. So again, I just think we are actually going round in circles now, quite considerably, because you're still resorting to using the word good to mean something, right? Which is, as far as I understood it to be, correct functionality of a human, right? And that, I just don't see how that's a good definition. Now, if you want to use good to mean something independent of humans completely, then I'm not sure why we're talking about morals. And if you want to say that's it's objective because I'm defining it as such, then that's okay. There's nothing wrong with doing that, and I would tend to do the same. But I don't see any reason then why we would want to exclude oughts from that definition to make it even more objective. I don't think it makes it even more objective. So why would you want to have this moral system which doesn't prescribe action for human beings? I don't understand that.
I don't want to exclude oughts. I'm just saying that it's the same as saying something is good. And I think my system does prescribe action. Because it's saying what is good, what you should do.
But you're not saying what good is. Could you just give me a brief definition of what you think good is?
It's, as in a word, it's function.
No, it must be more than just function. Right? It's got to be at least correct function.
No, it would be like coexisting functions.
Right, but like with the lion example then, all right, the lion functions, okay, to kill the prey, and we're saying that that's good. Yeah?
The lion, what a lion is good for is killing, and killing a wildebeest is good for the lion.
Yeah. Okay.
And
so how is this objective?
Wildebeest killing grass is good for the wildebeest.
So how is this objective then? If it's not good for the wildebeest, but it is good for the lion.
Well, it is objective. Because the action of consuming a wildebeest preserves the functions of the lion.
Right.
And the actions of consuming grass preserves the functions of the wildebeest. And the actions of predator and prey relationships preserves the function of evolution, which creates new life, which creates new functions.
Okay, so how is it not correct then for humans to kill each other in order to increase evolution?
Well, it doesn't increase
the function
evolution.
of it. Does, yeah. I mean, we are killing the planet, and many things are going extinct as a result of human action on the planet.
I mean,
So
the
take
Germans were
the
right.
humans, take the humans away.
They
Sorry,
killed
go
all
ahead,
the
Fabio.
disabled. No, I said, the Germans were right. They killed all the disabled. They saved resources and they increased the evolution. Yoo-hoo.
But we're still humans. You
Right.
can have humans improving and still have genetic diseases in the population. They don't.
Right.
One
Yeah,
bad
yeah,
apple doesn't spoil the bunch.
But just go to my example rather than the eugenics example, which I think is still valid. All right,
Yeah.
but I'm saying that evolution would be better off without humans. Why? Because humans inhibit evolution directly.
Oh, because we're part of evolution, and we're the most functional life form that evolution has created.
No. The standard of good, it's not about functional. It's not about judging the level of functionality. If it was, you would have used that as your definition in good, but you didn't.
I do.
What you said is, right, the definition of good is what improves, right, evolution, right? You said it's right for the lion to kill the wildebeest, right? It's good for the wildebeest to be killed by the lion because that preserves the function of the lion. Okay, well, if we're talking about preserving the function then of lions, okay, is that what's good? Only from the lion's point of view, right? In which case, it's only right that we improve the function of the humans from the human point of view. That's a necessary corollary of that statement. In which case, as Fabio said, right, what improves the functions of humans? Well, getting rid of the dysfunctional humans.
Not really, because there are plenty of people who have physical dysfunctions that have mental functions. Brilliant people, and just as far as just having relationships with people is a function.
Okay, so we should get rid of those that don't have mental functionality and don't have physical functionality because they're not serving any function, right?
They're
well, we may do it all the time, but again, in my moral system, that's harming. Okay, so we shouldn't do it. But according to your moral system, it's good because it improves functionality.
Wait, taking a brain dead person off life support is bad in your moral system?
A brain dead person off life support. Yeah, it probably is. Yeah, I mean, it harms some living creature, so in that respect, it probably is. But there are tricky points in my particular moral system is subjective, so I don't face these objective standards, which you're trying to claim you have. So well, just attacking my particular moral system is not going to get you out of this dilemma of what is functionality. And when you say it's good, I'm going to ask you what is good functionality, right?
No,
and when you try and describe what that is, right, then I think we're coming into problems. That's where these contradictions arise. All right, what's good for humans? What's good for humans is to dominate the world like we are. Okay, clearly, because we've managed to increase the numbers of humans on the planet. Okay, but that's at the expense of many animals. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I'll shut up.
What was I going to address? So if we're making the decision whether to take someone off life support, at least me, I wouldn't be making the decision based on anything other than, okay, it takes resources to keep the body alive, but there's no brain. Weighing that versus also the emotional costs. But there's also the potential this person's brain might come back online someday. So these are all, and there's the risk that we'll lose that potential if we take them off life support. So this is all just factual statements about what could happen. And if, like, this is what I don't understand about, like, the subjective points, the subjective moral systems, is they all seem to be using what I'm talking about It's just that they're putting emphasis on certain different things. Like, if you prefer, well, it's not about preference, but everyone's system seems to be about preserving what they think is good and minimizing what they think is bad. And all this can be described objectively without any preference. So you could take out, well, I prefer saving bunnies over armadillos or whatever. And you could just describe it all objectively without saying bunnies are necessarily better than armadillos, or without having human intentions. You could say bunnies and armadillos both do things, and having both of them increases the amount of coexisting function.
Right.
And this describes everyone's preference. It's just that
that's a
I'm
problem,
including
though, isn't it?
all possible preferences.
Yeah, but that's a problem then, because then you're saying that we ought to stop people which harm bunnies and armadillos.
Yeah.
Right. So should we kill, if, say, armadillos preyed on bunnies, should we kill all armadillos in order to save the bunnies?
No.
Or we're going to say, right, there's a certain amount of bunnies that have to die in order to save armadillos.
But that's like the ethical question of vegetarianism or veganism.
Maybe. Let's just stick to one example at a time, though.
Yeah.
Okay. So
that
is what you're saying, is in your moral system, some bunnies have to die to save armadillos. Right? And some armadillos have to die in order to save. Right. So all you're describing really is nature, and you're saying that's what the good is. And I don't think that that's a moral system for humankind, because we've managed to take an immune pill from nature in that respect, because we're no longer prey.
Well, I guess
we're at the top, and we have to have some kind of system in which we're going to judge, right, what we take out and what we don't take out. The number of bunnies that have to be killed in this example by humans, right? If we preyed on bunnies, for instance.
Well, I couldn't figure out a way for me to do it without my system, because I wouldn't care.
Right. I don't think that's an answer to the question.
But
saying that your system doesn't know how to decide these things. Mine personally does. Okay. But I recognise that there are grey areas, right? And because I'm not claiming it's objective, I'm saying, yeah, there are grey areas. I don't know the exact number of bunnies that have to be killed.
Like, if
right? But I recognise that some have to be killed.
If I wasn't weighing the factual function or preservation of function of things, I don't know how I would make decisions. But that's just kind of an aside.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the point as far as I'm concerned. You have to weigh them, and you don't have all the information. Therefore, you're going to have to make some arbitrary decision.
Well, you can make an informed decision.
In order to, yeah, it can be informed, but that's still going to be arbitrary.
Yeah.
In the sense that I'm using the word arbitrary here, right? Which is not just whatever, like I'm just going to put a pin in it and say that's the right number. No, it's going to be an informed decision based upon the best science we have at the particular time that I'm trying to make a decision, okay? But ultimately, that isn't going to be something which I can then calculate and go, okay, this is always the best course of action. It's always the case that we need this many bunnies to die in order to save this many armadillos, right?
But we do that.
Yes, we do, and we do it with subjective morality.
So, I don't know. It's when we're talking about ecology, there are like percentages of predators that have to exist in order to balance out the prey animals,
right?
So that they don't overeat the vegetation.
Sure.
And so that is one reason why, we don't have to use bunnies and armadillos. We could use lions and wildebeest. Why, or wolves and deer? Why having that predator is actually good overall, because what happens if there's no predators? Then the deer eat all the vegetation, then all the deer starve to death.
Sure.
Then you have nothing.
Yeah.
Or the deer get diseases and they have terrible,
I think
long, protracted, drawn out deaths.
if I
whereas
could stop you here,
getting
I
their neck
think we've
broken
already,
would be best.
if I could stop you here, we've already been over this example, and my response to it is, yeah, that's all true, but we are the top predator. There is nothing preying upon us. Okay, so we can't say this many humans need to die in order for the planet to survive. We have to make that decision ourselves, right? There's nothing in nature which is going to tell us that number.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so there is an arbitrary sense to this decision that we're just going to say, okay, well, look, we don't think the planet can really take much more than 10 billion people. So we're going to stop it at 10 billion.
But
right? So when we're talking about nature in this moral sense, right, that's an arbitrary decision, which we are going to have to decide. Yes, it's informed by science. All right. Yes, we can take it the best decision we can. Right. But by doing that, we're going to have to make some immoral choices.
So
it's not a moral system in that sense, unless we say it's subjective. This is the arbitrary measure we're going to do. And we're going to say, people in the West have had it good all this time. We're going to restrict the number of people in the West. Right. And we're going to allow people in certain areas to increase in population, and we're going to balance the population that way, all of which is just people making decisions and coming to consensus agreements, right? And that, by certain people's definitions, is not objective. Therefore, it's subjective. Go ahead.
I might be kind of cutting the Gordian knot here, but like, we don't really have to make that decision because populations won't grow past the food supply.
They will, yeah, they will. They don't last long necessarily, but they will. If they can, they will.
Well, not much.
Oh yeah, a lot. Yeah, a lot. I mean, that's why the Chinese had their one-child policy. That's why in places like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, right? And I'm including Bangladesh in the old sense, right? That's why their populations were extremely high. Why? Because they had a high infant mortality rate. Why? Because they didn't look after their kids, right? And they knew a lot of them were going to die, so they could have a lot of kids, right?
Well, let me say it will adjust to the food supply.
Yeah,
you can't sustain people without the food.
Yeah.
People will start starving if the food supply runs out.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. And if you think that that's your objective standard of morality, then okay, but that's kind of what we've insulated ourselves against, being the top predator.
So the question is, destroy the entire planet to sustain our current populations, or else people will start starving?
Our increasing population is what the UN thinks. We're going to start destroying natural habitats in order to keep the increasing population fed.
The most moral thing, by my definitions, would be is to find a way to preserve both. So,
right,
if you have to destroy the world to save a couple million people now, then you're gonna starve all 9 billion in a couple decades.
Well, who knows what time frame? Okay.
Yeah.
But that is the conclusion that we would draw to, right? The more natural habitats we destroy, the lower or the smaller the amount of land we have, which is going to be arable. Okay, in which case, the smaller the population we can support. Okay, so.
But if the standard is no one ever, if anyone ever is starving due to the system, then it's bad. It's like, there's some bad in the system, but overall, it's the lesser bad.
Okay. So you
'Cause
kind of
there's
changed your
more good.
language. You trying to change your language a little bit here. Yeah, I was
Well,
going to say.
I've always allowed for necessary evil or creative destruction
Hmm.
because
Again,
it's
creative
always
destruction seems a contradiction. Other than you're just saying, you're
it's
just saying that there.
paradoxical, but it's not really a contradiction.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, well, look, I think we're going to end it if you wouldn't mind, guys, because we're like 2 hours in, and I think we have gone round in circles a few times. Yeah, I appreciate your sticking to your guns here. I don't think you're defining what good is, and other than
Okay.
saying it's functionality, and when you say what functionality is, you're defining it as good. So I think that that's a problem because both of those words seem to contain, or at least you're smuggling in intent, which means, as far as I'm concerned, that it's going to be subjective in the long run, or an arbitrary decision based upon the only way to make it objective is to base it on consensus then. And by consensus and by objective, you don't mean mind independent. You mean individually mind independent, not dependent on any one mind, which is exactly what my moral system is as well. And so I don't see the difference here. And you're certainly not achieving objectiveness in the sense that it's objective independent of minds, i.e. it's just the physical facts of nature which describe what is good and bad, because I think there are just inherently too many contradictions, as we've been pointing out. So that's my final little say. Fabio, if you could say your bit next, and then we'll leave Snake to say last.
Yeah, no, it was a very interesting conversation. Thank you, Snake. I just want to go into the last part of the conversation. There is a concept which is called the Earth Overshoot Day. Basically, it's the day where the humanity's demand for Earth resources are how can I explain? So the planet has some ecological resources which are generated every year, right? So the Earth Overshoot Day is the day where the humanity's demand for those resources, they just get all the resources for the year. There is a website, it's called overshootday.org. This year, 2022, we consumed all the planet's biocapacity, so the renewable resources for 1 year. We consumed them, I think, in the first days of August. So right now, with this trend, we are at the point that we need 1.75 years. Sorry, 1.75 Earth, to sustain what we consume just for this year. And this is a trend which has been going on from 1971, approximately. So we are way past the point where we consume more than the Earth supplies, in a year.
Okay, thank you, Fabio. Is there anything else you wanted to add up on the direct point of the topic being objective morals?
No, I mean, I don't believe in objective morals. I do believe that there is the closest thing we get to it is that we can, society by society, groups by groups, we can agree on what is moral for us or not. That is usually something that you can find in the set of laws of every single country. I mean, there is a school of thought which says, that the laws that govern every country, they represent, the moral status and the moral choices of the population at that time. But again, it's a consensus thing, and I don't think we can get away from that. It's very complicated. I'm struggling to see any any objective standard which can be defined, in 20 words or less, stuff like that everybody can agree on. And actually, sorry, not everybody can agree on. Everybody has to say, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that works for me and works for everybody. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you very much, Fabio. And Snake, if you'd like to take us out, and anything you want to say or rebuke or anything at all, just go for it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to cover. And I really appreciate the criticism, because I'm trying to figure it out, and I grow with the criticism. I don't really agree with the criticism, but it helps me kind of tease out where I think the miscommunications are happening, and so I'll work on that a little bit. I think I did define good and bad and morality. I'll have to think on where that's not coming across. But yeah, I definitely include oughts, and the point is to prescribe actions, and so it's not necessarily a description of just the current state of things. It is fourth dimensional, if you will. It includes time as a dimension, because it deals with consequences of actions. And so, yeah, I would have to contend with, does this particular solution end up wiping out human populations in several decades? I think that you guys are kind of bringing up issues that are just hard for us to solve practically, and we might not have current knowledge, but that doesn't mean I'm not seeing that as a criticism of describing like what the best outcome actually would be versus us not being able to achieve it. So I'm just trying to describe like what would be best based on what that means, and not really the politics of how to achieve it, because we don't. That's where I think I would call ethics comes in, is where we as flawed beings have these systems that deal with the risk of us not knowing perfectly what the outcomes are going to be. Like, so we have prisons and justice systems, and we know that sometimes it's going to be flawed, and we might not know. We might give up on a patient who's brain dead, who in the factual reality of things might be cured by some unknown cure, or might come out of the coma or the vegetative state if we only kept them on life support for another week. But we don't know that. And so that's where ethics and intentions, I think, come into my system. But the moral facts that I want to talk about is what good and bad is. So I think that there are some logical problems with these things that we all accept are immoral. Slavery, murder, they have logical contradictions in them. And I think when we can describe what's going on there, it's reducing function, it's reducing existence, it's destroying things. And I think, and from that, we can derive the opposite. That's what good is preserving and creating. And I don't think anyone has to agree on that. I think that this can be derived from just the plain English usage of these words. I mean, there's flat earthers who can't even agree that the earth is a globe. So I don't, there doesn't really have to be a consensus, but I think the consensus aligns pretty much with this. So we have a consensus that slavery is bad. We have a consensus that, at least in the West, that like personal freedoms and individual rights are a good way to preserve this whole thing that we're calling society. And I think that I have a way of describing what's really going on behind that, even if most people are looking at it based on just personal preferences. And so that's what I'm trying to tease out here. And I'll get better at it.
Mm-hmm. No, that was good. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation as well. So thank you so much. I'd actually like to do a part 2, I think, because I think we could probably focus a little more on what you're saying. I think we did address the point that you were making when we were talking about TJump's moral system a little bit. And I won't go into that now. But I think it also applies I think it also applies to some of what you said right at the end there. So I don't know if you'd be up for doing it again, Snake.
Of course.
Okay, Fabio?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm available, I'm more than happy.
Okay, well, I don't know if that's an arbitrary decision or not, but yeah.
Well, it's 3 a.m., so
yeah,
I can
it
put
is.
it this way, right? So.
It's very late for us. Okay, thank you so much, guys. I'm going to hang up there. If you give me one moment before you leave, that would be fine. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Hopefully, we'll do a part 2 of this and maybe increase the number of people or whatever. And then we can really, flay the snake, so to speak. So thanks very much.